Hello, folks, and welcome to Author Adjacent, a podcast about the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author. I'm your host, Michael Vadney, and for today's episode, I have another author interview. I'm sitting here with international bestseller MJ Kuhn, one of the hosts of the SFF Addicts podcast and author of the Tales of Thamorr Duology, and now the ultimate SFF story Bible. Lots of letters in that introduction, but welcome to the show, MJ.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It is wonderful to have you. As always, I want to start with the first question. Like, how did you get to where you are today as an author?
Yeah, so it's a long journey, as it is for, I think, most people. And you know what the funny thing or the fun thing about talking to different authors, because, you know, on our show, SFF Addicts, we interview authors as well. And it's like nobody has the same story. Like, it's like everybody had like the most different, winding, crazy path that led them to where they are, which is kind of fun and inspiring. It's like this, you know, no one size fits all. Your mileage may vary. But yeah, so I mean, I've been writing little stories forever since I was a kid. And then I did not study, though, writing, creative writing, English, anything like that in college. Because, you know, I wanted to be an author, but then sometime in high school, you sit with a guidance counselor or something that's like, hi, you need to have a regular job. And I'm like, okay, fine. So I was like, I'll do the sensible major thing. And I did. I studied communication and marketing in school. And I got out of college and started my first full-time day job. And like a month into that, I was like, oh, no. Absolutely
made.
not. What have I done? I've made a critical error somewhere along the way here. I'm basically just like, oh, I can't do this forever. Like, I can't be like corporate girly forever. And I mean, here we are, like 10 years later. I do still have a day job. So like, spoiler alert, I'm still corporate girly. But you know, there's light at the end of the tunnel, maybe. But anyways, that's when I started drafting my first like book that I actually wrote and finished, right? Because that's when I think, like, for a lot of people that are like, you mentioned the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author, and I think like that's like the first concrete step in that journey is when you start writing stories and finishing them. Like, to me, that's when you're going from like, oh, I'm just a hobbyist writer, I'm doing this for funsies, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it for funsies, to like, okay, I'm making this like maybe a viable career option because you're like, you've got the like stubbornness that I think is key to, I don't know, making it in this ridiculous industry. But yeah, so I started drafting novels and finishing them, and I wrote my first like full novel in 2014, finished it, was so excited, and then like looked at it and was like, well, now what? Right? Like, what do I do with this thing? Like, I'm done writing it. I don't know how to make it and go into the world and be a book. So that's when I like went to Google and started doing research and just reading a bunch of blogs and reading a bunch of things about, you know, the publishing process and whatever. I was like, oh, crap, I need to get an agent. Like, I don't know any of this stuff. So I queried agents like crazy banana pants for months and months. And I got all form rejections, not even a personalized rejection, not a revise and resubmit, just all like, nah, sister. And looking back, it's because that book was bad, Michael. It was bad. Like, it just wasn't good. It was my first try, right? Like, I didn't know how to write a book yet.
You're working out the kinks.
Yeah, exactly. So, spoiler alert, that book was not among thieves.
Okay.
I scrapped that, and then I wrote another book, and then I wrote another book, and I didn't query either of those. I just wrote them and was like, good enough. Like, just threw them straight in the trunk. And then the fourth book I wrote was actually a young adult dystopian, as one does when you grew up reading, you know, The Hunger Games and whatever else.
I can say those were on fire for a while.
They were. Those were, you know, those were awesome back in the day. I haven't reread them. Maybe they're still awesome. I don't know. But that project actually did get me my first agent. So I queried that project and I did get agented with it. And we took the project out on submission.
Mm-hmm.
And it was on submission for a year. and it died on submission, and it never got sold. So then, but thankfully, I was following my rule that I tell every writer always: anytime you're querying on submission, waiting for beta reader feedback, anything, be writing the next book. And so I was doing that. And yeah, it makes, you know what it is? It makes waiting easier, but it also makes like rejections and harsh feedback hurt less because it's not like your shiny baby anymore. You have like a new shiny baby.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
new baby is like, always the shiniest.
Exactly. And so then like, oh, okay, oh, whatever. They can reject that baby. I have this baby now that I'm into. But but yeah, so I had Among Thieves in the hopper ready to go. So when we pulled that first project from submission, we were ready to go on sub with Among Thieves. And that one sold within 3 months. So that was great. And then that agent left the industry. They left the business. So I had to go back into the query trenches again after Among Thieves sold and before the sequel Thick as Thieves came out.
Oh my God.
Yes. So I had to go back into, and when I say the trenches, I mean like I'm slush piling it, baby. Just submitting into the slush pile back again. Although I'll say you have a bit of a leg up once you have a book deal, right? Like you can be like, hi, I'm the author of such and such. And, you know.
Yeah.
So I won't pretend that I didn't have an advantage the second time. But yeah, then I finally signed with my second agent in October of 2022. And now that's where I am.
Nice. So, and how does your latest book, the Ultimate SFF Story Bible, fit into all that?
Yeah, so that's kind of a fun part of my journey in that, so Among Thieves and Thick as Thieves are both traditionally published. They're through Simon & Schuster, Saga Press. And I am still like on submission with other projects in the trad market, but I want to do hybrid. I want to do indie publishing as well, for a number of reasons. And I mean, I'll go brief here. I don't know. We can dig into it more if you'd like. But
please, I want to know all about that.
Like, I want all the information.
Give me the deets.
Traditional publishing is so slow, right? It's very slow. I signed my book deal for Among Thieves in 2019, like June of 2019. It came out in September of 2021. Like, ouch. It takes a long time, right? It's just slow. You're just like, you know, I have 2 projects. I guess I'm not supposed to talk about being on submission, but whatever. I'm on submission right now. I have 2 projects out on sub right now.
Won't tell anyone.
Right. Except for all the listeners. I'm like a big into
You're telling them, not me.
Like, I didn't say anything. I'm big into like whatever, like smash the like silence and the murkiness of publishing. Let's just talk about stuff. But one of the projects I'm on sub with has been out on submission for over a year. It's just that since COVID, things are even slower. Like it's just things take a long time. People have to read a whole book and then they have to meet about it and blah, blah, blah. So I want to be able to have a little more agency over my career. And I write pretty fast and I want to be able to release things at a quicker tempo. So the Ultimate SFF Story Bible is me dipping my toes into the indie market. So I actually created and released that project myself. So it is for listeners that aren't familiar with it, which is probably a lot of you because I've been doing a terrible job promoting it.
Well, here's your opportunity. Go for it.
Here we go. Here's my pitch. So it's not a novel. It's a guided journal is what it is. So basically I took I'm an intense plotter and planner. That's
the way.
Right. What's up in here? I love planning. I love world building. I love character planning. I do all of that up front before I write my stories. And so I have a really intense process for it. And I was just like, well, what if I just make this into a digestible format, make it pretty, format it, get a cute cover for it, and release it as a guided journal that people can use to plan their own stories. And I've actually had some people reach out to me that they're using it to plan like their D&D campaigns too. And I was like, oh my gosh,
that is a really cool idea.
That makes sense. I didn't even think about that, but like it totally works for that. So yeah, it's kind of my exploration into KDP, into the formatting side of things, into doing the whole self-promotion thing. And I've just started exploring with Amazon ads, right? Like I'm trying to learn all of these things, and I'm learning them with the journal, and then I'll hopefully be ready and not a total noob when I do publish my first fiction project, indie as well. So Yeah, kind of like I don't know. It's at a pretty low price point too. I was just like, well, hopefully this can help some people, and then I can learn how to do this process while I'm doing it. And like, hopefully it's a win-win. So we'll see.
No, that's a pretty good way to do it. I've heard about a lot of people going hybrid too from the indie space. This is actually the first I've heard about it the other way around, where you go traditional and then you lean towards the self-publishing to be this hybrid setting. But I have noticed a trend that there are a lot more people that are trying to like mix and match the two, because there are benefits to both. I think a lot of people who are indie or don't know enough about the industry in general be like, oh, traditional is horrible in every single way. But there are nice benefits to it, because you get the expertise of all these other people that know what they're doing. They've been doing it for years. They've cut this little slice of the industry, and they're really good at that slice. And you get to tap into that.
Yeah, well, and you get the distribution arm, right? That's the thing.
That's a big part. Yeah.
Are my margins way lower than they will be when I do my first indie project? Yes, my margins are quite low. That's true for every traditionally published author. I make between 10 and 15% on every sold copy of like the hard copies of the book. And that's normal industry wide. Like when I'm selling my self-pub project, I'm making like more than 50% sometimes, depending on like how things are, or about, we'll say 30 to 50%-ish.
Yeah.
So it's, you know what I mean? It's way higher margins when you publish on your own, but my book is in Barnes and Nobles and, Waterstones across the pond and stuff. You know what I mean? And it's like, I can't do that on my own. So there are benefits to trad for sure, but that's why I think hybrid is like, I've been saying it all the time. Hybrid's the future, because then you get for some of your projects, and I'm trying to be discerning in which ones I choose to sub in the trad market, where it's ones where I'm like, I don't really know how this would do in the indie market. And then books where I'm writing it, where I'm like, okay, I know that there is a large indie audience for this genre, subgenre type of story. Those are the ones I want to self-publish, right? And then you kind of get to have your cake and eat it too. Hopefully.
So mostly you're thinking to do your self-pubs as like, these are your niche stories, where it's like, this is not for the general consumer, but there's a large group of people that are going to be really into this.
Honestly, it's more so like traditional fantasy, right? Like traditional sword and sorcery is not selling in trad right now. I mean, I'm sure some of them are, but in general, by and large, most of the stuff that's selling in fantasy is more like romantasy is really big, or like kind of the genre mashup fantasies, right? Like some sort of different stuff. Because trad is kind of tired of traditional sword and sorcery. But you know who's not tired of traditional sword and sorcery? A lot of readers.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's so many readers out there, myself included, that just love it. And you see a lot of indie authors doing the like traditional high fantasy stuff and doing quite well with it. So that's like some of my projects that I'm thinking about going that way.
That's an interesting disconnect from traditional publishers and the audience that they're supposed to be trying to serve. I hadn't made that observation yet.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's all, and I'm sure there's people sitting in boardrooms with more information and charts than I have access to, right? Whenever making these decisions in trad for whatever reason. But yeah, there's still readers that want it, so I still want to give it to them.
I think they'll be happy to have it. So I think you might be the first author I've had on here that was traditionally published. Everyone else I've talked to has been self-pub. What would you say was probably the most difficult part of your traditional publishing journey?
All of it.
Oh,
it's a brutal process. Yeah. I often say now my skin is Teflon, like it really is. And that sounds bad. It sounds like I'm dead inside. I promise I still have feelings and stuff. But let's
you seem joyous now. I hope that's happening.
So much joy in my heart. But you get so many rejections. Like the first trip into the query trenches was probably the hardest part, I'll say. And that's because it's when my skin was the thinnest, right? It was before I had kind of built up that critical mass of rejections and people telling me that I'm a hack and I suck. Which you just get, right? You just get that when you... Among Thieves has sold like 15,000 copies or whatever, which is not crazy, but like
That's still really cool.
really stoked about that. But of those people, a lot of them, hopefully not a lot of them, but there are several of them that think I suck at writing. Like it's just inevitable, right?
Yeah.
Some of the people that find your book, it's not going to be for them. But the first time I was querying, I didn't have that mindset. I had the mindset of like, this is my child made of words. This is a piece of my soul. And if you don't like it, you don't like me. And that's like, that was really hard. Like during that first trip into the query trenches, like I would get a rejection and then I would go cry on the floor of my closet, right? Like, it was just, those were tough times. So that was probably the hardest part. And I would say to anyone that's like, if anyone that's listening is looking to go the traditional route, bring your patience with you. Bring your thickest skin and just always be working on something else. I know I said that earlier, but that is like the life hack. And I think that a lot of times, like, okay, so that first project that I wrote and got just all rejections. Could I have then just gone back and tweaked it a little and then sent it back out and tweaked it a little and sent it back out, as you see a lot of people do with their first book? I could have. And maybe someday it would have sold. I don't know. But I think it's hard to let go of that first project. But I read, and I always wish I could remember where I read this. It was a blog that was basically like, you need to start writing your next project. I know it's hard to let go of the first one, but like, if you want to be a career writer, you were always going to write a second book eventually anyways, right?
That's a really good point.
So just do it now, right? You can always go back to that first book if you want to later. And then spoiler alert, by the time I'd written a few more, I went back and looked at that first one and was like, wow, this is a steaming pile of garbage. I don't want to come back to this. And that's okay, right? So, yeah.
No, I've talked about a little bit about that before in previous episodes, like with the first draft of your novel, and then you're supposed to take a break from it. It doesn't need to be long, just to get a little distance, because then when you come back, you will see that it is hot garbage, and that's okay because it's real and you can now fix it. But I can see a first book being that way too. But now you're at this point where like you have multiple books that have been published, both indie and traditional now, and now you have 2 or 3 trunk novels that you could always pull back out if you ever got bored. But you also have all these news stories that you're trying to churn out right now. Jeez, you're in a great position. This is phenomenal. Congratulations.
Yeah, well, that's what I always say with trad being slow. The good part about it is, okay, so Among Thieves was signed in 2019 and came out in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
By the time it came out, I had already written 2 other books, right? One of which was Thick as Thieves, one of which was one of my projects that's on sub right now. But it's, you know what I mean? It's like, that does give you a little bit of runway as long as you keep writing the whole time you're waiting. So yeah, but no, the trunked stories, I do have one that I want to go back to someday, but the other ones, I'm gonna be totally honest with you, I've cannibalized those babies for parts. You ever do that?
That's why you never get rid of old writings. Someday it will come back.
You save them in that drive, and then you'll be writing a scene someday, and you'll be like, I wrote a fight scene that had just a little sequence of blows that would go perfectly right here. Let me go find it. And you get to lift that and steal it from your past self and plop it in. And then that time wasn't wasted. You were just waiting for the right story for that little scene.
Yep. You validate yourself in that moment.
Right? Like, there we go. Past MG did know a thing or two.
Exactly. It's actually pretty interesting. I'm going back a lot from what we just said, but your path to going through college for a communications degree and then going out and being like, oh, this was a horrible idea. I did the exact same thing. I actually have a broadcast communications degree. I graduated college and I was just like, oh no. Dude,
the undo button.
Yep. You can't undo that. You got to keep marching forward though. So I definitely resonate with that. Feel that one down to my core. But something I did want to ask you is, what kind of things came into your life to like really introduce and really influence the types of stories that you really like to write? Because The Among Thieves and Thick as Thieves, they're very witty, they're very snappy, there's lots of action. You got a lot going on in there. I'm kind of curious what influenced you to write this kind of story?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always been into fantasy stuff, and I've always been into fast-paced stuff. So, like, at the point when I wrote Among Thieves, like, I wrote the first draft of Among Thieves back in, like, 2016, I think. And at that time, there were a lot of different influences. I was reading a lot of YA at that time, actually, which is kind of where the pacing came from, right? Like, YA is very fast-paced, very snappy, very economical with its word count. Or I guess I haven't read a lot of YA in the past several years. It was at the time, unless
I assume it still is.
Dramatically, I guess, I don't know. But yeah, so I borrowed a lot of the pacing stuff from the YA stuff I was reading. But I also say I first drafted Among Thieves when Game of Thrones was good. The show, yeah. So before it kind of jumped the shark. And that was where kind of this idea of let's have this multi-perspective story where everyone is kind of their goals are diametrically opposed, and you can't root for everyone, even if you want to root for several of them, right? Because for them to win, some of your other favorites have to lose. So that was an idea that I borrowed from that.
I can definitely see that.
Yeah. And then, so the first book I read for fun after college, right? Because, college, you're reading a lot of books not for fun. And I don't think I read a book. I mean, maybe I could count on my fingers the number of books I read for fun during all 3.5 years of college.
Yeah, I can't think of any.
I know, right? It's like maybe during summer, right? Like I would read a couple. I took classes in the summer, so maybe not. But the first book I read for fun after I graduated was Red Sea is Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch, the second book in Gentlemen Bastards, because I love Lies of Locke Lamora. And so then, of course, after I read that, I went back and reread Lies of Locke Lamora, and then did the whole, all of the books that are out so far. And that's why Lies of Locke Lamora is probably the most direct inspiration for Among Thieves for me, because that's why I was like, I want to write a heist. I want to write a heist. I want to do it. I love heist stories. Let's go for it. So, yeah, those are probably some of the direct influences at the time.
I've heard a lot about the Gentleman Bastard series. I've yet to get to it. There's just too many books, and I'm so happy to get to them.
Oh my God, well, just wait at this point, because book 4 is still not out, right? Okay. Scott Lynch is in the camp with Rothfuss and George R.R. Martin and all the other ones that are in trouble. Man. I read Lies of Locke Lamora I was a junior in high school, I think, the first time I read it. And I'm in my 30s now, and the last book in the series is still not out. So
that is disappointing.
I know, and
come on, you can do this.
Authors all write at their own pace, but I'm just saying you should read them. They're very good, but there's no rush.
Yeah, I'm not going to get the ending anytime soon, but
wait long enough, you could binge all of them. Who knows?
I do like binging a good book series.
Me too.
I discovered the Matt Dinniman Dungeon Crawler Carl books. Yeah,
I have not read those yet, but they are on my list. I've heard just so many great things, and especially the kind of books I enjoy, right?
Yeah.
Where it's a little bit and out there and funny and fast paced. And I've just heard that Dungeon Crawler Carl has all of those things. So
it is phenomenal. I'm going to go on a mini tangent for a second, but
love it.
Everyone on the internet and my brother-in-law, a bunch of other people were telling me you got to check out this book and you would love it. I was like, fine, I'll finally check it out. I read the first one and I was like, this is the best action comedy I've ever read in my life. And then you keep going and it's what? There's emotions in this too? It's just really good. Highly suggested.
God. All right, I'm going to have to finally pull the trigger and read this thing, aren't I?
It is an ongoing series, but he's actively working on it all the time.
Yeah, I've heard. And there's 9 books in it so far? So it's
I think that he's planning for 9.
Oh, okay.
I think he's written 5.
Okay.
But it's honestly some of the best lit RPG has to offer. If you've never tried lit RPG, it's a great example of the potential of the genre.
Yeah, right. Well, didn't he just get picked up in the trad market? I think that they're releasing a physical. Yeah.
Yeah, he's picked up in the trad. He's also picked up potentially for a TV show.
Okay. There we
Yeah, I
go.
just heard that like 2 days ago. I'm not sure how legit it is or how solid the offer is, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, like, once it's picked up, it doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna get made, right? Like, there's all
Yes.
politics and stuff, but that would be so cool. Oh my God, I love that for him.
Yeah, do yourself a favor, though. If you are into audiobooks, get the audiobooks. Sound Booth Studio is amazing. Jeff Hayes is amazing.
You're speaking my language, man. I'm a sucker for a good audiobook.
He does amazing voice acting for it, for all the characters. It's pretty phenomenal. And I'm going to stop ranting about someone who's not here now.
No, great, because now that I know that I can listen to it on audiobook, I mean, that's what I binge read the entirety of The Expanse earlier this year.
Oh, yeah?
And I read the whole thing on audiobook. And the reason why is like I like to walk places. So like,
Yeah.
And I'll walk places with headphones on, and it takes me an hour to walk up to the store, an hour to walk back, whatever, and I'll crush an audiobook, man. So I'm a fan.
I was talking to Adam Fernandez in the last episode about audiobooks, and it's just so easy to plug one in and like do your chores, get your exercises in, do your commute. They make consuming books so much easier so that I don't have to just sit down and do nothing else in my very busy life, and you can actually continue to enjoy them.
Oh yeah, well that's I'm actually plug. I'm on a panel maybe. There is a panel. I know. I'm trying to get onto the panel at Armadillo Con about audiobooks and like audiobooks, are they good or are they bad? And of course, if I get on the panel, I'll be like, they are God's gift to books.
They're phenomenal.
But yeah, if you're in the Austin area in September, I guess I don't know when this airs. Maybe it'll be over by then.
No. This is coming out the first day on the 6th of Armadillo Con. So if they hear this and they're in the Austin area, go check out MJ. She's there.
I'm in Austin right now.
In the future for us, but right now for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
We know how time works.
You know, it's all time's fake anyway. It's fine.
It's all timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly.
Exactly.
The quote is something like that. So you mentioned the Game of Thrones being like a big influence, especially early Game of Thrones when, let's all face it was way better back then. I see that most in Tristan.
Yeah.
In his character, in how he ends up at the end of the duology. Very crisp. Very good ending for him. I really liked that. I don't want to give anything away for anybody who might be picking this up, but definitely keep an eye on him. He's got a good progression through his story, so I can see the big Game of Thrones influence on him. But I will definitely say I loved Raya and Evelyn so much. Their relationship and how it builds, loved that.
I love them too. And so for readers or whatever, listeners that might become readers, it's as close to romance as I get, all right?
I think you delivered.
It's slightly sapphic, slow burn plot. But I was getting really nervous when book one was getting started to get like reviews from bookstagrammers and stuff, and they were like sapphic romance, which it is, but it's like it's very so both of the characters are so broken at the beginning, right? It's like if they were to just like, let's hop, straight to insta love, that wouldn't have rung true to anybody. So it's super slow burn, and I was so nervous because that was like right at the era when everyone was also comping Among Thieves to Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas.
Oh, I haven't read that one.
Yeah, well, are you familiar with Sarah J. Maas?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so it's spicy romantasy. What, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like that's just not what it is. I think people comp Among Thieves to it because it's like female assassin main character, right? Like there's other similarities, but I was like, oh my God, everyone's going to read this and then they're going to think that like, whatever, they're going to get this and they're going to be so disappointed and whatever. I got nervous. But I love Raya and Evelyn and I think they are adorable and in their own broken, super toxic individual sort of way. They balance each other though, I feel.
They do. It was a very natural progression for the relationship, like you said, from two very broken people who come from very broken situations that then kind of find this shining light in one another eventually. But that's got to be one of the difficult things about comps, especially when it comes to like various levels of romance, because there are some people that really like fade to black romance, and there are some people that like really spicy romance, and you got to be really careful about recommending the differences between all those. There's a huge
100%. That's the thing. Like, I will like sort of play on the SJM comp that I get sometimes, but I'm always very clear where I'm like, okay, the first couple Throne of Glass books, because like Throne of Glass is at least a little less. Well, I guess the later books it gets a little spicier, but the ones I've read the first few, that's spicy. So I'm like, okay, the first few where it's like, kind of action and blah blah blah, like it's more like that, less like the later. But yeah, it is. It's a kind of a fraught thing, the whole comp title business,
How do you end up picking your comps? Is that something that you had to deal with through traditional publishing, or is that someone like a committee somewhere decided like, all right, these are the comps that we're going to be selling to everybody?
Both. So like I pitched comps when I was talking to my agent before we sold the project, where I basically was like, so the comps that I'll use for Among Thieves are like, if I'm pitching it to like I do a lot of table events, like at festivals and stuff, where I just like hand sell my books, which I love doing. It's so fun. You just like are surrounded by book lovers all day. I love it. But like, it's an audience where they're not maybe super steeped in fantasy books. They're, they may not be familiar with Lies of Thamorr, right? Like they might just not be super familiar with all the things. So I just stick to the big titles, and I'll say it's Game of Thrones meets Ocean's 11, right?
Oh, I can see that.
Then it's like you get the heist piece, you've got the betrayal piece, you've got the fantasy piece, and like hopefully, people kind of get it, right? But yeah, for comps that I was using to publishing houses, I was saying like Lies of Thamorr. I know my publisher used Six of Crows as a comp, which also makes sense, right? It's another fantasy heist story. The one complication that I've gotten several times since they use Six of Crows as a comp is that it is YA. And so like a lot of people go into Among Thieves thinking that it's going to be young adult, and then it's not.
It is not.
Yeah, and then like they get a little whatever, disappointed or something, because if you're looking for a YA book, you want a YA book. And I get that. So that's been like the complication. But again, it's going to be like that with any comp. There's going to be someone out there that's like, this book is nothing like that book. And you'd be like, okay.
They're definitely double-edged swords.
Yeah, exactly. It's meant to be like it's got the vibes of it, not necessarily like this is a carbon copy, right? So. Yeah.
I would definitely, I don't know how often you do comps for those books anymore, especially since you're working on your Bible and everything and trying to get that one out. But I would also throw into the hat Firefly.
Ooh.
Because the banter always made me think of Firefly. All the like snarky, witty comebacks everybody's doing them to each other. Love that show. Definitely made me think of that when I was reading it.
Oh my gosh, I love Firefly too, and I am honored at that comp. Yeah, I can see it too though, because we've got a good mix of characters that are like actually nice, and some that are nice but they pretend to not be nice.
Yeah, you got those gooey centers. They're there.
Exactly. Looking at you, Merle.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like you go to a lot of conventions then. Like when this episode comes out, you'll be at Armadillo Con. You have another one coming out at the end of this month. How do you prepare for a convention as an author yourself? Like, what are you going there to? What are the most important things that you're going to be focusing on when you attend a convention?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, conventions, I'm still figuring it out. So
okay.
I've been to several. I mostly just go because it's fun. I really love cons. Like, really, like I'll just go anyways. It's fun to be surrounded by like just a bunch of people that are unabashedly enthusiastic about nerdy things. I love that.
I love that.
It's enriching.
Yeah.
But in terms of like from a business perspective, there's a few key things. I mean, I get a bump in sales every time, just because new people are introduced to the existence of my book, right? Like that's just like kind of the point. That's why you do the self-promotional stuff on social media that feels so cringy. It's why you do all this stuff, right? Because you have to, right? People can't buy something if they don't know it exists.
Yeah, I feel that.
Right. So it's like, you kind of have to. Panels are really fun. It's a good way to introduce, yourself to an audience. But also like to meet other authors, right? Because you're introducing yourself to the other authors on the panel. which is networking is another big part of why I do cons. You get to, and like not networking in the like corporate girly sense, but like more just like, I feel like being an author or a writer or whatever, anyone in this kind of creative space, is just like all of your coworkers are also just working alone in their apartments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, this is your only
100%.
chance to like actually go out in the world and like meet them and grab a happy hour or lunch or, you know, whatever it might be. So I really enjoy doing that at conventions as well. Meeting readers, right? I am not at a point in my career where I have like legions of people lined up to see me at signings or anything. But like I've had a few occasions where like someone will come up to my table and be like really excited and have a copy they brought with them because they already read it.
That's cool.
It is really exciting. Again, it's been, I could again probably count on one hand the number of times it's happened to me so far, but it's delightful when it does, right? So like,
oh yeah, you cherish those moments.
Experience too, yeah, where it's like, oh my God, like you really like me. You liked my book.
I've talked about this on previous, actually with Adrian. Just the writing community in general is so accessible, and everybody is always down to be like, oh, you want to talk books? I'll talk books.
That's because we are stuck living lives with like, you know, friends and family members that are, you know, they'll listen to us talk about books.
They're polite.
Yeah, they're nice enough about it. You can tell, you can see when their eyes begin to glaze, right? And just talking to someone else that is like, no, I will talk about books with you until 3 a.m. That is like the best feeling.
That is awesome. I'm not quite at the stage yet where I'm like going to conventions all the time. I went to one local one here in Dallas, and it was my first one ever. And I was like, whoa, this is really intimidating, but I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. But at the same time, it's like, wow, these people, they're everywhere. They're doing the thing, and I want to do the thing, and they're here, and I can just talk to them, and this is amazing. And it's like very high energy level, way more than I thought it was going to be.
That's a good point that you bring up, the local one, which you're in a larger market in Dallas.
Yeah.
But another like piece of advice for people that are querying or like looking to go the trad route. When I was in the query trenches for the first time, I went to a writing conference that was super local to me at the time. It was in a city called Novi, Michigan.
No idea. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a suburb of Detroit, but it was like 20 minutes from where I lived at the time, right? And it was a small little conference. Maybe a couple hundred people were there, but you know what was also there? You could buy a slot to pitch in person to an agent. And there were a number of agents from major agencies that were there. And I couldn't, you know, I wanted to pitch to several of the agents, but I couldn't afford that. So I bought one pitch slot though.
Okay.
And I did pitch to an agent, and that I didn't end up signing with that agent. I ended up picking a different one, but I did get an offer of representation from that agent. Right.
That's
so
fantastic.
it's like that's the thing. You get the chance to build that rapport with them in person. So best case scenario, they like you, they like the project, they want to sign you. I mean, she didn't like offer me on the spot. She asked for me to send a manuscript, but
yeah. It's a step towards it.
Right, that's best case scenario. But worst case scenario, you get real-time feedback on your pitch from an industry professional. Like,
that's huge.
They can't just give you a form rejection in person.
Yeah.
You bought a 15-minute chat or whatever to talk to them, right? So you pitch the project. Your elevator pitch is like a minute and a half or less, a minute. And if they don't like it or they find something unclear about the pitch, they can tell you that right now. And then you can use that to do your querying later. So yeah, and again, that conference was in Novi, Michigan. I am sure there is a conference within an hour, probably. I guess unless you're really out in the sticks, then you may have to go a little further. But like,
they exist.
Probably an hour and a half of where you live, right? There's going to be something at some point in the year where maybe there'll be agents. So yeah, just kind of look into it and see. It's because then you don't have to pay for the travel, right?
Yeah.
Like I just drove over there that morning and paid. This was also 2016, so God, who knows inflation or whatever. I paid less than $100 for like the whole thing. I'm sure at the time.
Oh my God.
So,
yeah. With everybody at Worldcon in like Glasgow this year, I've been definitely eyeing up Worldcon next year because it's in where is it?
Seattle.
Yeah. definitely eyeing that up
Yep.
because I'm like, that's a little more feasible than Glasgow. I might be able to do that.
I know I was supposed to be in Glasgow, but then just like, I know just the finances, I couldn't shake it out. The flight alone was like $2,000.
It's
like,
it's a
you
lot.
know, it's spoiler alert. Writers don't make that much money unless we're Stephen King. So
This is why we have day jobs still. We're not unicorns yet. Maybe someday.
yeah, like I couldn't swing Glasgow, but I was like, okay, maybe I can swing Seattle. Like that's a domestic flight. Like that'll be less than $1,000 to get from Detroit to Glasgow. I could get there, or I'm sorry, to Seattle.
Yeah. Seattle can definitely work. Yeah, you're up north, so that's probably even closer for you. Just a straight shot across.
Except for, can I tell you, like every time I've flown to the West Coast, like Pacific Northwest up there, if I have not a direct flight, if I do a connecting flight, they always connect me in Dallas, Fort Worth.
Why?
So I'll come see you, and then
That like doubles your trip. Like
they fly me way out of the way. I think it's a hub for American Airlines. Whatever.
it is. It definitely is. All right. So next time, if you have a layover or something, let me know. We'll grab a beer or something.
We'll hang out. I love it. Yeah.
So with your day job and everything, how do you balance like having the time to like pump out all these books? You said earlier that you're a fast writer, and I am dripping with jealousy here, but it is a hectic life, like trying to do your normal day job and take care of your health and just do everything you need to do to be a good and healthy person, and then write a bunch of books on top of that. How do you balance all of that?
Yeah. I don't. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm not, but it's hard. It is really hard. I will say the first piece of piece of privilege. I don't know what I was about to say there, but basically the first advantage that I have.
Yeah.
I do not have children, right? I have a cat. I have a fur child. But I know that this is a lot more challenging for people that do have kids. So
100%.
first caveat there. But I do work full time, and I have a podcast, and I freelance on the side, and I write. So I have a full schedule. I think the biggest thing that I do is I write in sprints.
Yeah.
So which that is just like 15 to 20 dedicated minutes where I'm not on my phone. I'm not on the internet. I'm not doing anything. I'm not stopping to question myself on whether I want to do this or that. I'm not stopping to research something. I am literally just either tippy-tapping it on the keys, or sometimes I handwrite because my brain refuses to cooperate with the keyboard.
Oh.
Or I'm just scrawling, right? And I do that for the full time. And if I need to, insert something, I'll do brackets and say, insert name here, insert detail, historical detail here, whatever the case is. And then I can go back and find that later. But that's one of my super tips. Because if you're working full time and you're dealing with, trying to, like you said, manage your health, maintain a household, keeping yourself afloat in general, maintaining any sort of semblance of a social life, you're going to have only pockets. And if you wait until you have 6 hours, 4 hours to sit and write, you're going to be waiting for a long time. So if you can do it in 15-minute sprints, like that's what I'll do, 4 15-minute sprints most days. And I don't do them back to back. Like I'll do one in the morning before work. Sometimes I'll do 1 or 2 on my lunch break, 1 or 2 after work, right? And just kind of pepper them in throughout the day. And then I get, I when I say I write fast, I don't actually write that fast. I'll get in it when I'm drafting between like 750 to 1,200 words a day ish. I know a lot of people write a lot faster than that, but I feel like it's like a pretty good clip. And so that's like what I normally aim for when I'm drafting a new project. But yeah, that's like my only advice is like just getting used to doing it in bite-sized chunks.
Okay.
And it's a really hackneyed quote, but it's true, and I forget who said it. You might know because everybody knows this quote. But it's like the muse has to find you working, basically. So it's like if you're not feeling inspired.
I actually haven't heard that one.
Oh, well, let's pretend I said it. No, I'm just kidding. It's someone really famous that said it. I forget who.
I'll believe you. I haven't heard otherwise.
Perfect. You heard it here first. I'm sleeping. Just kidding. But yeah, so it's basically like if you're not feeling inspired, tough noogies.
Yep.
Right? Like write something. And here's the thing, like you might only get 20 words in your 15-minute sprint because every word feels like pulling molasses out of your skull holes. But who cares? Those are 20 words you didn't have before. You're welcome for that image.
Yeah, I had to think about that one for a second.
But yeah, it's all about making it work. My least favorite thing, or the thing that drives me crazy, or whatever, that gives me the internally screaming meme, right?
Yeah.
Is when I meet someone, which is all the time. I'm sure you do too. Anytime you've publicly stated that you're a writer or you're writing books, people are like, oh, I'm going to write a book someday when I have the time. And I hate that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, first of all, it's like, it's not about having the time. It's about making the time, right? Like, 100%. It's not like I'm sitting around doing nothing all day. I'm like, oh, yes, I'll write a book. It's something you make the time for if you want to. And the other piece is like, I feel like they're cutting themselves short, right? If they actually have a story they want to share, well, don't wait, right? Don't sit around and wait for inspiration or wait for those 6-hour pockets of time. Just jack it in somewhere. So yeah, I guess I don't know if I really answered the question of how I find balance. I don't, but
I think you did.
I sandwich everything in tiny little bites.
I think that works, but no, I think that was pretty profound what you were saying about people who kind of just hold on to the story and just, honestly, they don't make it a priority in their life. But I think that is a big step for people who are moving from like writer to author, or just admitting to themselves that, one, this is something that I want, and two, I'm willing to do what I need to do to make it happen. And you carve room in your life to do it, whether it's 15 minutes at a time for an hour a day or 6 hours every 2 weeks. Like, you do what you have to do because you can't wait for inspiration.
Yeah. One thing too is it's like, not everyone is crazy like us, right?
Valid.
And that's just true, right? Like, it takes a special kind of crazy, and I say that crazy lovingly, to
so much endearment.
Want to do this to ourselves, right? It is a huge time commitment with absolutely no guarantee of payoff at all.
Yeah.
Right? And the only people that will actually end up pursuing that are the ones that can't let it go and can't stop, right? So if that's how you're feeling, I'm so sorry.
Well,
for a listener, you're among us, and you're cursed for life with really hard homework forever.
You gave yourself.
You gave it to yourself. You can't even be mad. But yeah, so that's the thing too. Is it's like some people are not going to want to actually sit down and do it, and that's okay. Like, they don't have to. But yeah, if you feel inspired to make the time,
yeah,
you have to make it.
I think that is actually a really beautiful moment to be wrapping this up because we're running low on time. But please, where can people find you and your books?
All the things. Yeah. So you can find me on all the main social media. I'm terrible about posting though, but I do post sometimes. I'm on everything at MJ Kuhn Books, all one word. You can also find me on my website, just mjkuhn.com. And on there, I have all my links to everything. You can get my books on there. You can get my story Bible on there. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you get a free story. I have a free novelette about a wizard who loses his ability to do magic in the middle of a mission and has to hide it from the rest of his crew. So it's just kind of a fun little story. But yeah, you get that for free.
You know what I'm doing after this?
Yeah, if you sign up for my newsletter. And the best news is, I don't even spam you. I forget to email you. You just get a free story.
That sounds absolutely wonderful. And when this episode comes out, you will be at Armadillo Con. Is there any information on that for like where you might be, or do you not know yet?
I don't know yet, but check my Instagram because by the time this posts, I will know, and I will have posted it there in my schedule. But I will be there Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm definitely, if you're in the writer's workshop today, when this airs, I'm one of the instructors. So hello, Professor MJ reporting for duty. Just kidding. But yeah, I'll be around. Come and say hi in Austin to me.
And that is going to be all for this episode of Author Adjacent. If any of this was helpful or even just gave you a good chuckle, consider supporting the show by leaving a review on your podcast platform of choice or telling a friend about the show. For more Author Adjacent, you can follow me on X at Author Adjacent or shoot me an email at authoradjacent@gmail.com with your burning questions, comments, or topic ideas. New episodes drop every other week, so stay tuned. Now remember, the journey from writer to author might be long, but until then, let's be author adjacent together.